It was my very first game my senior year. We played Tulsa. We all thought that we were going to win by a lot and get the season off to a great start. They come in with Gus Farrat and Chris Penn at receiver, and they're really good. Like, they're beating us a lot of the game. We get the ball on our own 4-yard line. We're down a touchdown and had to go the length of the field to score and get a 2-point conversion to try and win. We had a third down that didn't work, but clock was running. And I look over to the sideline, and coach is jumping up and down for me to call timeout. So I found a referee and called timeout. Coach is about 15 yards out on the field, took his sunglasses off, and he's waiting for me. I walk up to him, and he's clearly just pissed off. And he laid into me the entire time about how I didn't take enough aggression to get that timeout called. He is just screaming at me. And I said, "Are you going to call play?" And he got even closer, and he goes, "Call your own fucking play." I don't remember what I called, but I remember Harold Jasper made a great catch. We got the first down. We scored a touchdown, got the 2-point conversion. I come off to the side of the field, first guy there, giant smile, hugging me, Coach Fry. That was who he was.
Welcome to the Gallery and Hurley Unfiltered podcast, Iowa Football Rewind.
Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast player to get a behind-the-scenes look that you won't find anywhere else.
This episode, we are happy to have Paul Burmeister, quarterback from the Hawkeyes from 1989 to 1993. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Nick, thank you. Good to see you guys. Brian, good to see you as well. I certainly have been aware of what you guys are up to here in the podcast landscape, so it was nice to get the invite to hang out with you guys.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us. Being a local Iowa City kid, talk about your journey growing up in Iowa City and being close to the Hawks, if you would. Start out there.
My best memories of as it relates to Iowa athletics aren't so much Iowa football, and I loved going to the Iowa football games. And I was lucky enough to grow up in a really cool time there when I was really impressionable in terms of being a fan when Hayden Fry came in and took Iowa from being not relevant to really good. And I remember being a kid and watching all that. But I went to every Iowa basketball game that I possibly could, either with my mom or my dad. And man, I just remember those freezing winter nights and parking a long way away, it seemed like every time, from the old Iowa Fieldhouse, and making the long walk and opening the Fieldhouse doors, hearing the band, smelling the popcorn, knowing that Lute Olson and Bobby Hansen and Steve Carfino and Ronnie Lester and all those guys were up on the court. I couldn't wait to see every single one of those games. I loved watching what Coach Fry did as a fan and then being part of it eventually. But in terms of growing up in Iowa City and like my best Hawkeye memories, that's being like a grade school kid, knowing I had a ticket to the Fieldhouse and watching Iowa basketball. And that was when my fandom was at its most massive height. And I just loved being at the Fieldhouse when I was a kid.
So you do remember that transition to Carver in 83, I think it was?
I do. I was at the first game.
Okay.
Iowa lost a heartbreaker to Michigan State. And I remember I loved going to the old Fieldhouse and was excited to go to Carver Hawkeye. And gosh, it's crazy. It's been there for that long, since I think it was January of 83. I think you're right on there, Brian. But Bobby Hansen hit a shot there in the final second in the first game against Michigan State that plausibly won it for Iowa. But I think Steve Carfino stepped out of bounds like right before. And I was calling an Iowa basketball game this winter, and obviously Bobby Hansen calls the games on the radio. Yeah. And I got him to talking about that. I'm like, man, I remember you hitting that shot right there that was supposed to be good for the winner. So, yeah, I remember being there for that game, and it was fun to relive that memory with Bobby Hansen this winter.
So was basketball your first love in terms of sports? I know you were the all-time leading scorer at West High, at least for a while.
I congratulate you on doing your homework there, Nick. You did some digging there to find that out from the back of the old Iowa City West days. But yeah, without a doubt, basketball was my favorite sport. But so many kids growing up in Iowa, and I think throughout the Midwest at that time, I just went right from football to basketball to baseball every single year and just look forward to repeating that cycle. But basketball was my first love, and that's what I wanted to play in college. I would say all the way up until like my junior year of high school. I thought that hoops was going to be my thing, and just so happened I stopped growing, looked around, and realized, you know what, maybe throwing a football might be a better ticket than shooting the basketball to get into college. But yeah, I was a 3-sport kid growing up. All my friends loved all of them, but basketball was at the top of the list.
And did you get recruited to play basketball a bunch of different places as well?
Little bit, not as much as football. I do remember after I committed to Iowa having a meeting with Tom Davis and a young Bruce Pearl. Coach Pearl must have been in his late 20s that day we met, that winter day over there at Carver Hawkeye, and Gary Close as well. I met with those three guys shortly after I signed with Iowa to talk about possibly walking on to the basketball team. And they let me know I had a place there if I wanted it. And I really thought about it. And I remember a couple of years into my career, and I wasn't playing, and I wasn't anywhere close to playing as a quarterback at that point. I remember my dad called me, and my dad played basketball a little bit at Iowa State. And he was obviously a big fan of mine, like any dad is of their kid, and thought I was really good at basketball. And I remember he called me in my dorm room at Slater Hall one afternoon, deep into my second year, and kind of revisited that topic of maybe going out for basketball. And he didn't say, it doesn't look great for you for football right now, and maybe you should think about hoops. I'm sure that was on his mind, but it was very unlike him to call and really suggest anything. And I was just thinking of that memory the other day, something as it relates to my own fatherhood with my own two boys, but did think about it before I got to Iowa and thought about it once I was there too, about walking on, but just obviously never made it happen. I don't think it was on my heart anymore as much as football was once I got to Iowa.
That's interesting to hear, because I think a lot of guys that we've talked to have gone through this kind of position in their careers where they were like a fork in the road, right? Where they had doubts and weren't playing and didn't really see the future as well, and pushed through that to get to the places they got to. And so I think it's just a rite of passage that everyone goes through in those situations. It feels like, at least from the guys we've talked to.
It's so true. And while we were going through it, whether we were 18 or 19 or 21 and 22, we all had different types of arcs in our career. And I know each one of you guys played early, which not a lot of guys get to do, but for sure, I didn't enjoy it at the time. It was frustrating. I can't say I had a lot of confidence in my own ability, at least when it comes to the Big Ten level, those first couple of years. But as you get older and put your entire experience in the rearview mirror and it gets further and further away, you really realize, as you called it, Nick, those forks in the road and those really difficult times, you didn't like them when you're in them, but you get in your 30s and 40s, and now I'm in my 50s. I just turned 54, and I am so thankful that it wasn't easy. It would have been fun to play as a true freshman, but I didn't play until my fourth year, until later in my fourth year. And the things that I learned about mental toughness and competence and stick-to-itiveness are lessons that I lean on all the time now in my business, as a husband, as a dad. I think about those things quite a bit. And it was such a good teacher. So many good life lessons that help me now, because it was hard at Iowa. Things didn't come easy. And we weren't a Rose Bowl team when I was playing either. We were an up and down, decent team that kind of just barely got into a bowl game. So if I could go back and be a 4-year starter and play in the Rose Bowl 4 times and be an All-American, I would make that change if I could. But being that things played out the way they did, and there were a lot of tough times in my career, I'm thankful for it now, because it has helped me so much in the things that matter to me now.
Yeah, that's great. Can you go through your recruiting process? Like, who was recruiting you at Iowa, and also talk a little bit more about the other schools that you were looking at, or what your kind of journey was at that point coming from West?
So my recruiter for Iowa was Dan McCarney, and Coach Mack went to City High, knew the landscape of Eastern Iowa really well. And even though he coached the D-line and went on to, he was there for 1 season of mine before he left to join Alvey at Wisconsin as the D coordinator, then went on to Iowa State. Mack was a huge reason why I went to Iowa. I felt such a connection with him. He was an excellent recruiter. He had just high energy, really into connecting. I had great conversations with him, and really made me feel like Iowa was a great place for me and how much he wanted me there. And I was very connected to him, and I didn't want to let him down. So he had a lot to do with why I chose Iowa. Coach Patterson had just become the quarterback coach and offensive coordinator. So Donnie was a big part of my recruiting as well, and immediately liked him and knew that I would enjoy playing for him. I almost went to Kansas State to play for Bill Snyder. I was this close to going. Snides was my guy. when I was growing up. I would go to Iowa football camp. He was always good to me. So we were really familiar with each other. And I had a feeling that he liked my game. And I remember hearing from him mid-December of my senior year before I heard it on the news. No social media then, of course. I heard it from Coach Snyder that he was going to Kansas State. We had a late basketball practice that night. Phone rings, it's Snides. And he's, listen, people don't know this yet. I just took the head coaching job at Kansas State. I'm going to coach Iowa in the Peach Bowl, but I'm going to Kansas State. I want you to go with me. I want you to come on my first recruiting visit. We're going to have many more conversations this winter about it, but I just wanted you to know that I'm going and I want you to come with me. And he and I already had a pretty good relationship and then developed an even closer relationship those next few weeks. And I almost went and said yes to Kansas State. And it's really, to me, a nod to what an excellent recruiter Dan McCarney was, what a good early connection I had with Donnie Patterson, and just as you guys know, what Hayden had built there at Iowa. When it came time to say yes or no to somebody, being right there in the shadows of Kinnick Stadium with a team that was going to bowl games, that had quality people in the program, they made it clear they wanted me to go. In the end, it was hard to say no to that, but I felt a real pull towards Bill Snyder and Kansas State.
Did you end up taking a visit down there?
I did. I actually went on his first recruiting weekend, Brian. I was a part of it. I think it was January 13th, 1989. I think it was that weekend. I may be off by a day or two, but that was his first recruiting visit. And I flew down there after a basketball game at Cedar Rapids Jefferson and spent 2 days with him and was really excited about the potential. It was a program, guys. I don't know if you remember. I'm a little bit older than you, but it had just been rated by Sports Illustrated. And I think they were on the cover of the magazine as the worst program in the country. And they were either 0-11 or 1-10 the year before. And for as much as I believed in Snides and knew that he was going to get it done and was really serious about going, there were parts of that program, whether it was the facilities or some of the kids in the program, that were reflective of a place that had been down for a long time. And I remember feeling both of those as a 17-year-old kid in my visit, all the potential and all the excitement and my connection to Snides, but also really recognizing some of the things that really were not there at all yet within that program. And I think when I compared that to everything Iowa had going on and already had, it tilted things in the favor of Iowa City.
I think they might have been the worst football program ever. If you go back in history, we have to look that one up. Maybe someone knows, but they had no championships, a handful of winning seasons over the decades.
Sounds right.
Something horrible like that. It wasn't just like the last year. It was one of the worst programs in college football. So like his turnaround there was incredible. I think the most incredible thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. And he got that thing going within 2 or 3 years. And then they were they were a traditional bowl team. I think there was a year they were really serious contenders for the national championship, maybe multiple years. Yeah, what he did there, nothing short of phenomenal.
I'm a little fuzzy on the years. So did you ever play against McCarney as a coach then? Or you just missed that?
So I was a backup when we played Wisconsin when Mac was the D coordinator. These scheduling quirks in the Big Ten that would pop up. My senior year when I was a starter, we didn't play Wisconsin, and there was one other team that didn't show up on our conference schedule that year because Penn State came in. Penn State's first game of the Big Ten was in Iowa City in '93. Next touchdown we score, it will be the first 32 years later, by the way. We didn't score that game. That was a long afternoon. But no Badgers on the schedule that year, which kind of turned out to be good for us because I think that was the year they won the Big Ten and went out and won the Rose Bowl, and we were a 6-5 team. I did not actually play against Mac as a starting quarterback.
I feel like there was a 2 years. Maybe we didn't play him the next year either.
Probably, yeah.
And they either went to the Rose Bowl or had a really good season too, but we skipped over 2 really good teams and then picked up again, and they were back to earth a little bit, and we beat them a couple more times before I think Fry finally lost towards the end of his career. But we skipped over the
really good
teams, luckily. So
he had a hell of a run over Wisconsin. I think it was over a decade that Iowa went.
Another turnaround that's just unreal because Wisconsin's football was not very good for decades.
Albie did an amazing job. There's so many examples out there of how good that staff was, the Iowa staff in the early to mid to late 80s, just really second to none.
We've had a lot of conversations about the coaching tree, and I think the thing we've realized is the high school coaching tree is impressive as well, right? It's like you've got all the names you've heard of and the programs that have gotten turned around and legendary status that way. But then also you got the Marv Cooks, the Jason Dumonts, the guys that have gone back and done really well in high school, and kind of even down to, we talked to Cedric Shaw, training kids and that kind of stuff. So it's just that really, it was a huge impact on a lot of ways and a lot of different people.
Yeah, it's really cool the way a number of those guys throughout the years that played for Coach Fry, and a lot of those guys were teammates of ours. It's been fun to see all their success, but I think it's great. It's a wonderful example and a nod to Coach Fry of kind of what he built there at Iowa, because I felt like his secret sauce, every single time there was a good year, it wasn't that it was rare that he had a team that underachieved. He had a way to get these guys to overachieve, and a team that probably was 7-4, 8-3 could find its way to the Rose Bowl. And I think it's because of this feeling he created inside that environment, or inside that building, of the us against the world, and we're in it together, and just a unity and closeness and really a toughness that it was hard to be a part of. It was hard to feel like you would achieve the status of one of the people that was really one of the leaders and well respected by everybody, but that's what made it cool too. And that's what made it special. And I think whether it's Marv or anybody else that you mentioned, I'm sure they did it in their own way and had their own personal style with the way they were succeeding. But I bet if you talked to those guys and brought that up, the way Hayden was able to get a little bit more out of all of his even really talented groups because of how close they felt together and what they felt like they were achieving together. And again, how difficult it was to be a respected person in that environment. I bet they all had a part of that in their high school success as coaches too.
Definitely.
Did you have Dan Dickel as your coach?
Yeah.
So he's former Hawkeye. Did he talk about Iowa at all? He was not part of the Hayden Fry time, but
yeah,
in the 70s. But did he talk much about Iowa or help influence or persuade you to go to Iowa?
Yeah, yes, and yes, and Brian, I appreciate you bringing him up. So Dan Dickel was a terrific defensive end at Iowa from Mid-Prairie High School, early 70s, had a nice little run in the NFL as a D-end with the Baltimore Colts. He was a terrific defensive end. He did support me going to Iowa. He had a really good career there and a good experience, but he didn't push it at all. He really played that role perfectly, and that he just supported me where I wanted to go. And as I started to lean toward Iowa, he was friends with Dan McCarney. They were teammates at Iowa. I think it brought a smile to his face to know I was going to be a Hawkeye as well, but he never pushed me in that direction. He would have been just as supportive of me if I wanted to go to Kansas State or Iowa State. So I think what I remember most, and we all have such good memories, or hopefully we do, of our high school coaches, but what I remember most about Dan Dickel was he was the first guy that just believed in me so much that he saw me through. I would have 2 or 3 bad games in a row as a junior, and he always told me I was good, even when I didn't think I was very good. And it's such a valuable tool. Even as a guy in his 50s now, it's nice if I have a bad show or a game I didn't call very well. If someone I really respect puts her arm around me and lets me know that these things went well, that still feels really good to me as an adult and as a professional. But looking back on it as a teenager, I can't thank him enough for the confidence he instilled in me and what he saw in me right away. He told me right away, he's like, you're a Division I quarterback and I'm going to help you get there. I was probably riding my moped to open gym night and then pitching a double hitter that same day. I wasn't all about playing quarterback when I was 16, and he saw something in me and really brought it out and developed it. And he didn't waver with how much he believed in me. You bring up his name and I'm like, man, I'm so thankful that guy was my coach, not because of any scheme we had in high school or any play we ran, but just how he believed in me and what a powerful thing that is when you're a kid.
That's great. Let's move into your first year at Iowa and the transition going from being a local kid, going to school close to home, and what your first year transition looked like and how that was and how that felt for you and some of the things you remember from that.
I remember it was really hard. And I don't think my story is that much different than many other kids back then. It's really common now to see kids come in at any position and start as freshmen, or at least contribute. And in 1989, when I got to Iowa, we had 21 kids, I think, in our class, and Larry Blue was the only one that played. And we were all surprised that Larry played. It was rare to have a true freshman come in and get anywhere near the field. And we were always so excited when Larry got out there and made plays. I remember he recovered a fumble for a touchdown at Iowa State. And we were all just so thrilled that we were just like, man, this guy in our class is already out there and he's in the end zone against our arch rival. But I remember feeling like it was bigger than I was ready for. And we always hear this compliment now that kids come in and play and they say, it's not too big for him. It was too big for me. I was not ready right away at all. And I spent the year on scout team. And that was back when there weren't as many rules with how long you can practice. We had mandatory meetings Sunday and Monday night. The varsity defense would really get after the scout team without many rules. It was a long year for me. And I did not for a minute feel ready. Like I didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel that year in terms of, okay, this is fine. I got to put in my time down here on scout team. I'm getting there and I'm going to be out there soon. I didn't have that feeling at all. Spring football was the same. My second year, I started to feel like maybe I can do this. And I remember my third year feeling, I want to be out there. I could do this. I can do what Matt Rodgers is out there doing. Matt was coming off a Big Ten Player of the Year season, though. So it was too late. And it was kind of like, okay, I'm going to be waiting here. I'm going to be sitting here and waiting for a while because my time to shine and maybe get out there early in my career came and went when I was a true freshman struggling on scout team. So I was not ready to play right away. I felt intimidated right away. I saw something I wanted to do. Like I didn't want to not be there. I wanted all those guys to respect me in the worst way. I wanted to get in the huddle and get under center and feel good about it, but that didn't come from me right away. It took some doing. It took some fall practices. It took some spring practices before I hit that point. Once I did, I was chomping at the bit to play, but it was a process that was slower than what you see a lot of times for quarterbacks right now.
I'm always interested in that journey of what and who got you through that. Was it your parents? Was it your coaches? Was it your own mental mindset? What allowed you to go from coming in, questioning things to saying, okay, here's a path or here's where I want to get to? And what gave you that kind of strength to do that?
I think it just internally, first of all, it took stringing together a few practices in a row where I would comprehend the play call and spit it out on the huddle, get under center and felt good, drop back, made a good read and a good throw, and kind of exhale. I'm like, oh, I can do this. And then you do it again the next play, and then you do it again the next day. And the next week you have more good days than bad. So I think for like internally, it was a process of stringing together some good practices, whether it was spring or fall practices. That's before what anybody else was doing to help me. That was internally for me, is I had to do it a bunch of times in a row with reps and days in a row to really feel it and to really believe it. And I think how much I looked up to the two guys that were older than me, and they both became two of my closest friends, but I thought the world of Jimmy Hartlieb and Matt Rodgers. Man, I love those guys and still do. And I wanted them to look at me and think of me as a player the same way I looked at them. I knew they were good. Matt started my true freshman year, and he didn't start out great, but he built his way towards a Big Ten championship quarterback and an all Big Ten quarterback. He was really good. And I knew Jimmy, when he got his chance, was going to play that way too. I looked at those guys every day in practice. I looked at them every day in the meeting room. Our locker space was the exact same space. And I wanted them to think of me the same way I thought of them. And I think that outside of my own internal process of how I had to piece together a bunch of good days in a row to really believe it. The other thing, to answer your question, Nick, about what got you through that, I really think it was my desire to be respected by the people that I respected a lot.
That's interesting to hear that. I don't know if it's a thing in a lot of teams where you have guys that are competing day to day, going head to head for the same thing and putting in the work and still have these lifelong relationships with the people that they did that with. To have that kind of dichotomy of being someone who you're competing against versus being a friend is kind of an interesting, I guess, microcosm of maybe the way our team was, or maybe that's a general thing in other teams, but it really speaks to the people that we were around that were like, okay, we're all just trying to do this one thing. We want to be the best, and everybody wants to be the best and make everyone else the best. So It's interesting to hear that.
I think it's a really spot on observation that really kind of gets at the heart of what I talked about, that feeling that Hayden Fry created inside the building, is that we were all, it was, you can't say all, there are 100 plus kids in the team, but it was a really close group. And I remember, those guys I was competing with, Jimmy and Matt, I couldn't love those guys more. And looking back on it, just from a standpoint of the track to playing early, maybe I would have been more hard-edged about it if I didn't think so much of those guys. Jimmy was the best man at my wedding. Matt was a super close friend too. Maybe if I didn't really like those guys, if I wasn't that close with them, I would have rolled up my sleeves and grinded even harder my second and third year to try and beat one of those guys out. And it's not that I didn't want to play, but looking back on it, I was happy for their success because I was that close with those guys. I wasn't on the sideline pulling for them to do poorly. I liked when they came over and they were smiling and we high five and hug. And maybe if you kind of look at it holistically, taking a step back, maybe it didn't help me play early on how much I looked up to those guys and what close friends we were. But ultimately, I do think it was a small part of what I talked about earlier, how much those teams were helped by we truly loved each other. It sounds cliche-ish, and unless you're inside it, you don't really know. But I love those dudes, man. And I was just as happy for their success as I was to think about beating them out, which there are positives to that. And to be honest, probably negatives too.
Yeah, I think that's a testament to your character, one. And then I'm sure you competed the best and hardest you could because that's right. Who you were. So I don't know if I'm going to let you by with that one, but nice. So let's start moving more into when you started to get on the field, your mindset and preparation a little bit farther in your career.
So 89, that was my true freshman year. And if you guys remember, Chuck Hartlieb had been all Big Ten, 87 and 88. He was just a really good quarterback. He was my host on my visit, a very good friend now. And he was excellent for most of 87 once they finally let him be the starter. And then 88, he was the guy. You go Chuck Long, Mark Vlasic, Chuck Hartlieb. Chuck Long sets the pace, but Chuck Hartlieb wasn't too far behind. So there was a big hole to fill. And a guy named Tommy Paholski, who's no longer with us, he has passed away in recent years, but Tommy started a little bit as a freshman, I think, when Mark Vlasic was hurt. And then he was competing with Chuck and Dan McGuire for the first part of 87. Chuck eventually won that job. Tommy, like we all did back then, didn't transfer, stuck around and waited for his turn. And he was a fifth-year senior, and he was a captain. I really liked him a lot. My locker was right next to him. He was so good to me when I was a true freshman. Funny guy, lighthearted, always much more willing to smile than be too serious about anything. We played Oregon, the very first game of 1989. They came in with Bill Musgrave, who was a really good college quarterback, stuck around the NFL for a while as a backup, and I think he's still coaching and NFL offenses. They beat us 44-6. And it was like, I had grown up watching Iowa football, just hammer teams in September throughout the 80s. And here come the Ducks, and they just beat the shit out of us. Like, it was not even close. And Tommy struggled. Like, he was bounce passing, curls, overthrowing out routes. It was a real struggle for him. And coach put Matt Rodgers in at the end of the game, and Matt brought some life to the offense. And they started Matt the next game, and he started from there on out. So 1989 started with Tommy Paholski for a second. He wasn't out there long, and they turned it over to Matt, who had his struggles. He was a third-year player, had never played when Chuck Hartlieb was playing, was really up and down in 1989, but I think he had more good than bad, especially toward the end. And he used that experience. Then in 90, he was the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year. We went to the Rose Bowl. We went to Ann Arbor, went to Champaign, went to East Lansing, and won. He was a big part of that. And then 91, we were a 10-win team with Matt as a starting quarterback. He was the guy in 90 and 91 after finding his footing during live action in what turned out to be a pretty tough 1989 season.
And then 92 is when I joined the team as a walk-on. Nick came in 93, but I remember going into that, maybe you and Jimmy were going to be competing for that open job. Was there anyone else in the mix in that season?
It was Matt Ide, who came in 1990 from Michigan State. It was Matt, myself, and Jimmy. Matt got hurt at Ohio State in November of 91. It was a huge game that we won. I think we were both ranked in the top 10 at the time. and Iowa won. Matt dinged up his knee somehow. I forget how, but he hurt his knee. It didn't need surgery. Nothing was torn, but he missed a couple games. So Jimmy went in and played in 91, and he played. I think we won both of the games he started, home against Indiana, at Northwestern, and then Matt came back for the snow game against Minnesota and also played on the Holiday Bowl that we tied against Ty Detmer. So Jimmy, I think he was the front runner anyway to replace Matt. And those 2 games he played and played well and really gave him a nice head start on Matt and myself. And then spring ball came around. Jimmy played great, won the job. And 92 was an up and down season right away. We played in the old Kickoff Classic at Meadowlands and lost to NC State. We went out to Colorado when if they weren't national champs that year, they were knocking on the door. Now, they beat us up pretty well. We went to Michigan right away. They were great. They beat us. So we didn't start out well in 92. And I think Jimmy was a little up and down too, but he had really settled in. I think he was on his way to being an all-conference quarterback and got hurt at Illinois. It was October of 92. He went down with a dislocated shoulder, and that was it for him. Matt Ide came in, did a nice job. And then Matt started the next 2 games. So Matt got the nod over me, which was one of you talk about disappointing or tough parts of your career. Those were a tough couple weeks where you're watching. It was one thing to watch Jimmy go out there and do it. Another to watch somebody in my class that I had been competing with really every day for a couple of years. So Matt started against Purdue and Ohio State. The team as a whole didn't do as well as it wanted to. And I ended up getting a chance late against Ohio State, the game we were down a couple touchdowns. I came in and had a couple nice drives, got to start the next week at Indiana. We won, came home. I started again against Northwestern. We scored a bunch of points. I played well. And that kind of, just as the year before, Jimmy had got a head start because the starting quarterback got hurt. I think I had a head start there based off the confidence I gained from those 2 wins in the games I started, and then won the job in spring football in 93, and then just had that one season in 93 to be the main guy.
Brian, your memory is impressive, but I think Paul's maybe just a tad bit better.
He's rattling off dates.
He's getting into months. Yeah.
He's
granular enough to get into months and all that. Yeah.
I can't remember what my wife told me this morning and things I was supposed to do, but in October of 92, yes, that's in my wheelhouse. I can remember what happened then.
And that 17-yard out route to Dean.
There you go. It was his fault, not mine.
Yeah. We talked to Coach Tripp last night.
Love Tripp.
He mentioned Indiana. He said you got baited into doing an audible, and like trying to throw an out route or something. He was laughing about that last night.
So Tripp was the guy, for better or for worse, his job on game day. Carl Jackson used to do it, and then Coach Jay went to the 49ers. So Tripp was the guy who was like literally attached to Hayden during the game. He was right next to him. The running back coach always was. So Tripp got the brunt of a lot of things. As you guys know, Coach was pretty emotional during the games. And so Tripp had to stand there and take it a lot. And we were at Indiana. It was my first start. And I don't know why I did it, but we were up. It was late in the game. We were up like 14-0. And the corner was playing so soft. And we were just running the ball. Just a couple minutes left, running it out. And I'm like, man, I can't take that corner being 15 yards off. I got to check to a pass. I just got to do it. So I checked to a pass. Couple minutes left. We're running the clock out. And as I checked, the corners rolled up. They got into this blitz and came after and just drilled me. So I'm on the ground underneath some Hoosiers. Not only was it obviously stop the clock, we're trying to run it out. So I'm in trouble. That was a poor decision to do that. And I remember as the Hoosiers were like piling off of me, I'm looking out my like ear hole or our sideline, and Hayden is like throwing his stuff at Tripp and like waving up and down to him. That's what would happen if the quarterback did something he wasn't supposed to do. Tripp would get yelled at. He likes to bring that one up to me that I got him in a lot of trouble late in the game that we already had in the bag at Indiana by trying to complete one more pass. But I couldn't help myself.
That's pretty much how he recounted it. We did laugh. Sherman would say that Fry would give you guys, like, it was a 3rd and long, he'd give you the check with me play.
Oh yeah.
You get frustrated if it didn't work out for you. So it was like, I was like, wait, nothing's good at the 3rd and long.
Yeah.
Okay, let's give them that that play to figure it out. I was like, thought that was pretty funny.
Coach was good about letting us call our own plays at times. I appreciate that about him as I've gotten older. I mean, he enjoyed calling plays, and I think he was good at it, but he gave us some pretty good leeway to change plays and to call our own plays. But I really wanted the check with me on 2nd down and 4. That's when you're dealing. You can do anything you want. When it's 3rd and 17 and standing there looking over the sideline, he's thinking the play clock's winding down, he would just go, "You call it." I was like, I wanted to call the last play. I don't know. At 3rd and 18, I don't have that much interest in it. I remember one time, as long as we're talking check with me on 3rd and long, we were playing Illinois. It was just a horrendous game. It's the kind of game that all these years later, I can get into a funk about thinking about it. It was a homecoming game, just awful. And so things had gotten bad. We were playing a serious game of catch up, and it was like 3rd and 20-ish, and we're deep. I think we're inside our own 10-yard line. And that week, because of injuries, we had moved George Bennett, a defensive end, to tight end. Ernest Crank, who was I think he was a player of the year in Illinois as a running back. He had recently moved from running back to tight end. Like, those guys were playing a lot, and we were in double, which meant they were 2 tight ends, one to the right, one to the left. And I got the late check with me. We were in double. I get up to the line of scrimmage, clock ticking down. I look to one side, and there's George Bennett. He's been a tight end for 5 minutes. He's got Simeon Rice over him. I look to the left. Ernest Crank had been a tight end for a couple of weeks. He's got Kevin Hardy over him. And we got 7 seconds left on the play clock. And I just remember that moment thinking, this is not going to go well. This is not going to be a good down. And I don't remember anything monumental that happened on that down, but that's the kind of day that was. And every now and then those late check with me's would come in. One other thing about Hayden when it comes to quarterbacks and calling plays, he would always have us at the hotel on Saturday morning. The starting quarterback and the backup would write down on a piece of paper their favorite plays. And I remember thinking as a young guy, I'm like, okay, what's he going to do with that? We were at Michigan State, a close game my senior year, and it was like 3rd and 7, and I'm looking over to coach, and he has that sheet in front of him, and he's looking at the plays I gave him. And I'm like, man, this is a guy who's been calling plays for decades. He doesn't need the reference of a 22-year-old quarterback who's only been starting 1 year, but he empowered us. He knew that if I liked the play, it had a pretty good chance of working. So that's one of those things when I look back on coach and how he dealt with the quarterbacks that I really appreciate. Not only did he choose me to start and let me play through some times when I wasn't playing that well, he took my counsel and advice on play calling in key times. He let me be a part of it. He let me have that kind of ownership. We never really talked about those kind of moments, but it was hard to be his starting quarterback. But once you got there, there were some perks to it. He believed in my play calling intelligence, and he believed in my ability to run a play well that I liked. He leaned on those things during the game. As I look back on things now, that's one of the things that makes me smile is how much he believed in us, not only as guys who could make a good throw, but as play callers too.
No, I was just going to ask about that relationship because we talked with Sherman, and it surprised us, I guess, that there wasn't as much communication with him and Coach Fry as we expected. Thought that it was almost like he was attached to the hip of the starting quarterback, but he said he would check in with him on how's the team doing, maybe insights on plays that he likes. But we thought that they were just constantly talking and said, no, it wasn't as often as you might imagine.
I guess my spin would be a little bit differently than Matt. Coach was a little further down the road. We all evolve and do things a little differently in our jobs as we get a couple more years ahead of us. So maybe in 96, 97, he wasn't doing as much of that. And I didn't have as much communication with Hayden as I did with Coach Patterson. Coach Patterson and I were like colleagues. And it's another thing I really appreciated about my playing time there is once you became the starting quarterback, Coach Patterson he wasn't MFing you. He wasn't yelling at you. He wasn't belittling you. It was kind of like this unspoken, we're in this together. We have a lot to gain or a lot to lose based off of how these offensive game plans go. So let's roll up our sleeves and be colleagues. And Donnie treated us that way. And I really appreciated that. I liked it then. And looking back on it now, it's nice to remember how he treated that. But I remember talking to Coach Fry a fair bit during the week about he would want to know what we liked. He would tell us what he liked, what he noticed about a defense. And I really think this is going to work. It was a nice back and forth that where there was this guy that when I was a true freshman, I was really, like most of the kids who were true freshmen, I was intimidated by Hayden Fry. I was afraid of him. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a coach having that kind of clout. But it was really cool to get to 4 years later to where we were just having conversations about what would work, about what he liked, about what I didn't like. There was one time I remember so well an interaction that I had with Hayden that people usually get a kick out of. It was my very first game my senior year. We played Tulsa, and I'm sure you guys remember it well. It was one of these games I think we all thought that we were going to win by a lot and get the season off to a great start. They come in with Gus Farrat and Chris Penn at receiver, and they're really good. Like, they're beating us a lot of the game. And we get to the last couple minutes. We get the ball on our own 4-yard line. We're down a touchdown and had to go the length of the field to score and get a 2-point conversion because there was no overtime then to try and win. And we were pretty far into that drive. We had moved the ball 60 or 70 yards. We had a third down that didn't work. It might have run it or a short completion, but clock was running. And I look over to the sideline, and coach is kind of like gesturing, jumping up and down for me to call timeout. So I found a referee and called timeout. I thought in the fashion I was supposed to. So I'm unbuckling my chin strap and walking over, and coach is about 15 yards out of the field, took his sunglasses off, and he's waiting for me. I'm like, shit, was the last play that bad? What did I do? But we got like a 4th and 8 or 4th and 9 to call. So I walk up to him, and he's clearly just pissed off. And he laid into me the entire time about how I didn't take enough aggression to get that timeout called, about how I was too passive about it. I was too slow. Don't you see the clock and what we're trying to do here? You cost us 5 seconds. And he was really upset. And the timeout is going, and I've got this unofficial clock in my head. I'm like, this timeout's going to run out. Like, at some point here, we got to get beyond him yelling at me and get to a play call. And he keeps going. He keeps going. I'm looking at Tripp, who's right there. We're making eyes at each other. And he is just screaming at me. And we get to the very end, and he's just looking at me. And I knew that the timeout was about over at that point. And I said, are you going to call play? And he got even closer, and he goes, call your own fucking play. I was like, okay, yes, I got you. Ran that guy in the huddle. I don't remember what I called, but I remember Harold Jasper made a great catch, and it was a better catch than the throw. We got the first down. We scored a touchdown, got the 2-point conversion. I come off to the side of the field, first guy there. Giant smile, hugging me, great message for me, Coach Fry. That was who he was. He was going to ride the wave of emotions. When he didn't like something you did as a starting quarterback, he was going to let you know, and he was going to stick to that message. When he thought you did well, you would have thought he was your dad. He was that happy for you and the team. I remember that scenario so well because he didn't want to get off his message. He thought as a quarterback I had done so wrong and wanted me to know that in that next situation, you got to call a timeout a lot faster. You're letting the team down by not doing it. That's all he wanted to say in that timeout. And then he put the onus of me calling a play. Get out there and see what you got. So he and I never talked about that after it, but that was him in a snapshot. He was a tough guy. He was going to let you know when he didn't like something, and he was going to be super happy for you and throw his arms around you when he did it.
Wow, I had no idea that's how that whole drive unfolded.
I think Hurley and I both blacked out in that game.
That was our first game.
Like, we didn't realize the situation of it. Like what we had to do to win. It was just kind of like this whirlwind. One of the plays, I remember going the opposite direction from the actual tape. So I think my brain was just like,
oh, it's like, Nick, you would know, you kicked the other way.
You're like the other way. I was like, no, that was going that direction. I watched the tape. I was like, wow, but I do remember Scott with the touchdown on that and just being like,
yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's like whirlwind game. That was like first one. I guess
crazy, wasn't it?
Other things.
It's like how much time left? It was just less than 30 seconds or seconds left.
Yeah. Tulsa got the ball back and had time for, I don't know, 3 or 4 plays maybe. We were inside a minute.
What about some other games you remember from either the 92 or 93 season where you played?
The games themselves, Probably what you would expect, guys. We were basically just a little bit above 500 both of those years. So some really fun times, some really difficult, disappointing times too. I think more than any one game, but what I remember most about those years or that stretch of games, I started the last 15 games of my career, is the feeling that I got when I finally got to be the starter. As we've kind of laid out here, I spent most of my career as a backup, whether I was fifth string as a true freshman or third string as a sophomore or second string as a junior when that year started. Most of my games I spent as a backup. And there was a lot of time where I wondered if I ever get to be the starting quarterback at Iowa. And when I got that opportunity late in the season against Ohio State and did well enough to get the start that next week, what I remember more than anything about that game at Indiana, that was my first start that we won, coming into the football facility that Monday. And you guys remember the way that the meeting rooms used to be split up and divided. The quarterbacks had the room right next to the DBs and the O-line. And Coach Patterson would always walk in. We met at 2:15 on the Monday. He would always set down on everybody's desk the depth chart that had kind of like the wrap up of the games and the grade of the film behind it. But the depth chart was always on top. And I looked at that thing for I don't know how many dozens of Mondays where I was not the starting quarterback. And he put that thing down on my desk and it said Burmeister #1. And I remember that feeling of joy and being proud and being relieved and being excited for what was coming, being nervous that I was the guy. Just all of those feelings, it made such an impression on me that I can dial it up in my head right now, 32 and a half years later, what that felt like exactly. And I remember that practice, walking out to the practice field on the very first play, walking into the huddle with guys that I'd been watching start games for 3 years, Mike Devlin, Scott Davis, Danon Hughes, Lou Montgomery. And they're all there waiting for me to come in and looking at me in a way like, we believe in you, man. Welcome to the first team huddle here. And it was like, that was fantastic. I could sit here and tell you about any kind of touchdown pass or an interception and how those felt, but the feeling of finally getting out there and knowing that I got to play with those other 10 guys after wondering if that was ever really going to happen, that's probably my favorite memory as a starting quarterback.
And I was thinking you would have said that you were like held a bunch of Alamo Bowl records for at least a year.
For what part of atrocious play?
I was saying it was the first Alamo Bowl. So
Most
like
completions.
you had some record for something.
Yeah, that was a rough way to go out. Yeah, really tough way. I call a game down there, guys, every year for the last 14 or 15 years. So we at NBC have the All-American Bowl. It's a wonderful high school showcase, but it's in the Alamo Dome every January. And like every time I walk into that building on that Friday early in January, I just like swallow hard and stand up straight and be like, it's okay. You don't have to go against the Cowbears today.
Yeah, right.
They're not blitzing again. Don't worry, they're not blitzing.
Yeah, that was a rough one, a tough one to go out on for sure. But to be honest, guys, it's nice to go back into that building now as an adult and just remember that there's a lot of good things. Don't have to hang your hat too much on what didn't go right on New Year's Eve in 1993. It was a long time ago.
Fortunately, we got to go back in 96 and
and you guys
cleanse that a bit. So we weren't stuck with that 93 memory.
I remember that.
Helped us a little bit.
We always joke we were there enough that we should have bought a condo, because I think between myself and my brothers, it was four or five times it felt like, it was like we should have moved there. We probably should have been paying taxes there. We were there that much, but
good bowl city.
Great spot for a bowl, for river walk and all that, for sure.
Yeah.
Anything else on Iowa football, or we want to transition to pro day and NFL and post football?
Yeah. I could talk to you guys all day about Iowa football stuff, but that's the highlights, some of the things that I remember most about playing and about Coach Fry too.
One more thing on Iowa. So when I went to school, I was worried that I was an Iowa City kid going to University of Iowa, that this wasn't really going to give me a college experience. And I found it to be completely different. That is like a whole nother world, just going over the river or just downtown. So did you have that same experience, or what was that transition from West High and literally going a mile or two?
Yeah.
Did you feel like you got away, or did you still feel like your hometown?
It's an astute point to bring up, Brian. It's something that you and I have very much in common that a lot of other people don't, just based off of where they grew up and where we grew up there in Iowa City. I remember thinking a lot about that. And that was part of the draw to a Kansas State, is that I would have that true experience of getting away. And that was on my mind a lot. And I remember wondering in the moments there that January of 1989, really thinking about that when those times came where I'm like, okay, I'm really going to think about this decision now. And that was on my mind a lot. Would it be the right thing to stay right there for college? And I ended up having a wonderful experience. You and I, the three of us have talked a lot here about some of the difficult parts and some of the fun parts, but as a whole, those 5 years were fantastic. So many good things in my life now are because I went to Iowa and was a decent quarterback there. So I'm really happy I went. I suppose you could make an argument, Brian, I'd be curious to see if you feel the same way, that if you were really going to do college the right way, you'd go away. Like my oldest son is a freshman at Notre Dame right now, and it's an 11-hour drive away. He went away for college. And I think about it now more than I have in a lot of years, just in what a cool experience he's getting. He's made it positive with his own maturity and in his own kind of toughness to how he's going about things being away from home. But I didn't do that. And it's made me think more. I'm like, I loved Iowa and I wouldn't change it because, again, so many things in my life that are positive now are because I went to Iowa. But it would have been a lot different to go away, to get that classic college experience. And I'm really happy that my son is getting it. But I did find a really rewarding, positive 5 years at Iowa that felt like I was doing something new, different than what I did at West High School, even though I went to high school in really the exact same spot.
Yeah, I think I did want to go away too, but I didn't have any opportunities. I had a very limited options. And of course, Iowa had a great program, so that was like a no-brainer. But my worry was that it wasn't going to be that different. And the experience was completely different. And I tried to make it separate. I didn't go home and do my laundry and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But my parents could stop by and see me regularly. So had they not been that close, it would have been more difficult to go through some of those struggles. And during the summer, I could go and stay at home very close by and still be close to the campus and the workout facility. So I think it ended up being really good despite my concerns about it.
Yeah.
It worked out well. And when I look back now.
Good. Let's be honest. I was your roommate. So you were going to be sitting in your room, whether it was in Iowa City or whether it was like 300 miles away somewhere else. So it wouldn't have changed that much. You were like, I'm going to get out and see the city. I'm going to meet a bunch of people. It was like, you were pretty much locked in no matter where it was, that geography. So it was,
worked out well. You made a good call.
Yeah, it worked out well. You saved yourself
just a different view out the window.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. Paul, you mentioned your son going to Notre Dame. What kind of advice and what kind of experience did you pass on to him or your kids in general, just from the things you learned from your experience at Iowa and life?
He's a student athlete there. He plays lacrosse. They're back-to-back national champs. Little plug for the Fighting Irish there. He did very well to earn himself a spot on that team. I think what I wanted to pass along to him athletically was, and then this is the hard part. I don't know if you guys have kids who are athletes, but there are so many things that come to mind. You guys know how it is. You get to a certain point of adulthood and you've thought so much about your career and what you should have done or what worked that you could write a book about all the advice that you would give to a friend or to a kid, somebody else's kid or your own, about how to handle their career as an athlete. I really tried to just be the guy in the background who was always available and supportive. And when I say in the background, not hands off, way away, like every single day, be there, but not be someone who yelled at them or made them feel like they weren't tough enough or didn't do enough. I do this with my youngest son as well. I want them to feel supported. I want them to feel like dad's proud of them. As long as they're out there trying hard, and that old cliche, doing their best. But the effort thing is the one thing that's non-negotiable. As long as you're out there pouring your heart out there and doing your best for your teammates and your coaches and really for yourself, you're not going to hear from me, why didn't you do that? You should have done that. I can't believe you made that move. I really tried to not be that way and just kind of read them. And with my oldest son, he has been so in love with the sport of lacrosse for so long. and has had such a good work ethic about it and enjoyed like all the things that go into trying to be good at something. Like he just intrinsically enjoyed since he was a kid. So I didn't need to be doing too much other than just being there supporting him and letting him know dad thought it was pretty great. There are a lot of like little details and conversations that I suppose I could get into, but as a whole, I just wanted them to know that as long as they loved it and worked hard at it, there was going to be a lot more good than bad, a lot more positive than negative. And that I was here to drive them wherever they wanted to go, to play catch with them, whatever they needed. I just wanted them to know that at home was someone who was really proud of them and really believed in them.
That's great. I have a 2.5-year-old daughter, so
There you go.
seeing life from a long distance away and being able to process differently and think about those things in a different way, being older and having the experience that way. So thanks for telling that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's easy when your kids find something that they like to do. And for me, both my kids really enjoy sports, so it's an easy thing to feel connected to, but they could have just as easily been excited about the theater department or music or something that had nothing to do with sports. And I think it's easy for us dads who played sports. If your kid loves them, that's a really fun connection. But what you really want to do, I think, and hey, in no position to preach, plenty of things I wish I be better at as a dad too, but all you really want is for your kid to find something they really enjoy doing and to get them through like how we felt about football. You're going to get through the times that are really painful and difficult because you love it, because it matters to you. And you just want them to find something that they feel that way about so that they're going to work hard at it and get through the tough times and get to those many moments that feel so good when you achieve something, whether it's tangible or intangible. If you see them find something, like that's what lights you up and really makes it easy to be just the supportive parent instead of being the one who's yelling at them for one thing or another.
Yeah, that's great. As a new parent, I'm always just trying to get tidbits of information from everyone of what's worked for them. And so I'm just trying to be a sponge of, okay, what do people have that I can take and use and develop on my own thing. So
I would say, like, from my own failures, because I've gone a lot as a dad, if you find 2 minutes to connect with your kid, no matter what the age is, if you have like 1 minute, 3 minutes, whatever it is, a small amount of time where it's a good interaction, where they know you're engaged with them about something they're interested in, that's a great day. That beats a day when you are around all day, but don't really get any kind of quality connection with them. And I tried to do that because there are times where I'm going to be home for 10 minutes when they're awake, and then I've got to leave for 6 days for work or leave for 4 days. So as your daughter gets older, you said 2.5-year-old daughter, right?
Correct.
Yeah. As she gets older, if you know you're not going to be around her much on any one given day, it might be walking out the door to school or having breakfast or 5 minutes at dinner. If that's a good interaction where she can see that you are interested in what she's interested in, that's a damn win every day of the week. So I've tried to, as a dad who's gone a lot, I've tried to make a lot out of little interactions that pop up, because sometimes work will put you in a position where you don't have those long stretches of them.
Yeah, life can get hectic.
Yeah.
Especially trying to balance all those things as a family, for sure. A huge shout out to Nate Kading and the incredible team at Hamburg Inn No. 2 for revitalizing a true Iowa City icon. This historic spot is back, serving up the comfort food and legendary pies and shakes we all know and love. Whether you're a local or just visiting, make sure to stop by and experience the magic yourself. Check out their story and menu at hamburginnno2.com.
I injured my shoulder in that Alamo Bowl early in that game. Got hit on my right shoulder and had an AC separation, which is not like a dislocation is much worse. There are grades of separation that are a lot worse, but my AC joint got separated. It's a nagging, annoying injury that takes about 3 or 4 weeks to get better. But I didn't give myself that time because I had the combine coming right up. Looking back, I should have taken some real time off, gotten some real attention for my shoulder, and gone to the combine in a different physical condition. But I went there, and I remember, like, you go through all these physicals with all these doctors, and like all of them just like messing with my shoulder and sending me over to the hospital to get an MRI. Then I'd go to the next group of 6 doctors, because I think they were in little clusters for 6 different teams or 4 different teams. They would send me to the hospital for their MRIs. So I went not in the best shape, just kind of like physically with my right shoulder. But it was an awesome place to be, man. I'd always heard about the combine, and to be there, to be throwing and working out next to all these quarterbacks that I knew who they were from watching them on TV, and to have all the coaches and GMs watching, it was a thrill. Looking back, I wish I would have done better. But I think a lot of us can say that about a lot of things that mattered to us when we were 22, 23. But it was a really cool stretch of days for me. I was one of the quarterbacks there. It was Gus Frerotte. It was the two of us. We were the throwing quarterbacks that year, which meant that we got there before the other quarterbacks and threw drills to the DBs and linebackers, stayed after the quarterbacks and receivers were there, and threw to everybody else. So we were there like 6 or 7 days. So and with a shoulder that wasn't feeling my best anyway. That was a long week, but also a really, really helpful week to get up close to all those guys, and you see them, to make friendships like that, to perform on that kind of stage was really, I feel lucky that I got a chance to be there, and I got a chance to see it as an athlete. It was really cool.
Did you get interest from teams? What was it looking like on draft day? Was there potential you get drafted, or which teams seemed interested?
I feel like the Dolphins and Jets came through a couple times to work me out in the spring. And I remember maybe the Eagles as well, like feeling hopeful there. And you're like, hey, we all want to get drafted, but I didn't get drafted. And I didn't get invited to be a free agent that year either. So I tucked my tail between my legs, kept working out. I wanted to get out of Iowa City, but I didn't want to give up this dream of playing professional football just yet. So one of my best friends in the team was a year older than me, a guy named Chris Green, a walk-on from Marshalltown. And Greeny had moved to Denver. And so I just threw all my stuff in a car and drove out there and slept on his couch for 6 months just to get away and be somewhere else and still train for football. So I kept in shape. I would drag Greeny, who had a real job. He was in the real world. And we lived in this apartment next to a Toys R Us. And I would make him run routes around cars in the Toys R Us and throw him footballs during the fall and spring. And he was a great sport to do it. He was probably laughing the entire time. But that's how I kept in shape. Came back home, got a call from the Vikings, just got lucky. They needed a quarterback in the building. Back then, they had the old World League of American Football, and Brad Johnson was their backup. Brad went on to win a Super Bowl with the Buccaneers as a starting quarterback. But Brad was the backup, but he was in London as the starting quarterback in the World League. Warren Moon was their starting quarterback. Warren had just signed this deal because I think he was thinking, he was well into his 30s at that point, probably close to 40. He might have even been 40 back then. He had just signed a deal with TNT to be a sideline reporter throughout the NBA playoffs for them. So he was going to be out of commission, not in the building from like early April through, I don't know, sometime in the summer. So they needed a quarterback around, and they called me, and I drove up there, signed. They put me through a workout for a whole day, told me they were going to sign me, drove back home to Iowa City, put all my shit in the car, drove back to Minneapolis. And I was the quarterback who was there most of the spring because Warren wasn't, Brad wasn't. They drafted Chad May, a quarterback from Kansas State of all places. And Chad was in and out. But I was the one who was there for all the OTAs, for all the mini camps, all the quarterback receiver sessions. So I had some really good, a lot of time in the practice field with the Vikings. Brian Billick was the quarterback coach and no coordinator. He and I got to know each other really well and had a really nice relationship with him. I used to come in the facility and meet with him every morning because it was in his best interest that the quarterback that was out there had a grip of what was going on play-wise. So he and I spent a lot of time together just so the quarterback who was there could make things functional. Made it through most of training camp, through 3 preseason games, and got cut. One of those cuts there late August, and that was it. So it was wonderful to be there. It was a lifelong dream. And I think what it helped me get to the point where I could eventually move on because I saw, hey, Warren Moon is a lot better than me. Brad Johnson beat me out. He's better than me. Chad May got drafted because he has more talent than me. He can really throw the ball. And I wasn't quite good enough in some of the moments in training camp to make it. And as difficult as it was to admit that at the point, as I got older, it was easier to move on for having been there for 6 months and seeing, you know what, I had some good days there, but I didn't make it because I wasn't good enough. It was nobody else's fault than mine. And I think that kind of reality was so intrinsic to see, because I didn't have to wonder. I saw it myself. It helped me move on to the next thing.
That's actually pretty unusual to not get into camp that rookie year.
Yeah, I know, right?
And then get in a second year later without any experience. Very fortunate.
And lucky. Yeah.
And a humbling experience, right? That camp is like, the pressure of that, how those things are ran, just
I know.
Straight football for months. Feels like, it was a tough experience.
Yeah. It's weird, Nick, because it's like, it's where you always dreamt of being and having that chance, and you get there and it's long and it's hard. It's difficult. And there are a lot of emotionally tough times. I remember we were doing a joint training camp practice with the Saints because they were just across the river there in Wisconsin. And I guess every year, either the Vikings would go there or the Saints would come to Minneapolis, or I guess we were in Mankato. And we were spending a day with the Saints. And I remember this day because, like, looking back on it, I didn't know it in the moment, but I think it's one of the reasons that I got cut. And I was in on a heavy run game drill. We were in the red zone, and it was like a situational thing. And it was probably like on the 5-yard line. And Brian Billick, we were watching it the next day with the entire team, and he stopped it. And he goes, I want everybody to pay attention to what happens when one person doesn't do his job. And he hit play a bunch of times. And basically it was a reach play to my left. And at Iowa, when I would open up to my left, the running back was usually aiming for kind of like in between the guard and the tackle. So it wasn't like a huge amount of distance that I had to cover to get there. The Vikings reach play, the running back was sprinting outside the tackle. So I didn't quite get there. I knew I was supposed to, but I just didn't have my foot on the gas. And I had to reach the ball out at the end. I got it on his hip, but he fumbled, and it wasn't his fault. It was my fault. I didn't get the ball to him. Meanwhile, there's a giant gaping hole leading to the end zone. It would have been a walk-in touchdown. And I think that was a big reason. When you're a free agent, they're looking for reasons to cut you. Like, you got to string together all kinds of good days in a row. And if you do something bad in a big moment, it's not like you were a 3rd-round pick and they're going to forgive you. Everybody saw that. It was a big mistake. And I give Brian credit. Like, I'm not mad at him. It was like, I'm the guy who didn't get the ball to the running back. And he pointed out to everybody what a problem that was. And I think that's, looking back on it, that's one of those reasons why I got sent home.
Yeah, you have a lot of time to think about it too. So that's
right.
That's not good either. Yeah, right? You can go through those things. And funny to think that Warren Moon was 4 years later at the Chiefs or wherever it was for a bit. I think when I was popping through there for a quick second.
Yeah.
Some of those guys stay around forever.
In his mid-40s then, probably.
Yeah, he was. I can't imagine how old he was at that point. Yeah, he was 20 years older than I was at least, I think.
He was super cool to me, man. He had his own pair of shoes. It had this like purple #1 emblazoned on the back. I forget what brand they were, but he gave me a pair. And I think he gave me something else too, but I had my locker next to him. And the morning I got cut, I went in super early to try, and I wanted to get that stuff to take it home. And they had already come through and taken all my stuff out. Those purple #1 shoes that I pictured having at home, they're out there somewhere, probably thrown away many years ago.
It's interesting. You talk about those like shared training camp experiences. We did one against the Vikings, and one of the people that I was really just, wow, this is just another human than I am, was John Randall.
Yes.
You had to deal with that every day. Practice. Yeah. So that would not be something I would want to tangle with at all. That was impressive to watch that guy. And the spectacle of it too, right? There was a lot of energy and
noise and the volume.
It was like a 12 all the time. 12
Always.
Like speed, activity, and noise.
Yeah. Sweet guy though. Like, underneath all the crazy, like, there was a nice guy in there that I saw a couple times, which I didn't expect to see, but I have a lot of respect for that dude.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's true though that it does feel better when you know that you weren't good enough.
Yeah.
And that, because we talked with Larry Blue, and he said he had an injury and they got cut, and he never got to go through a training camp and ended up going into the Barnstormers and playing there, but
Yeah.
you could sense there was that kind of what if I had gotten that chance to go through camp, and at least if you get cut, it's like, all right, I can see, but he got, for whatever reason, didn't get that opportunity. And it seemed like a little void there. I wish I could have at least gone through and realized I wasn't good enough, or maybe gotten the opportunity to play. So we all, fortunately, I think, got enough a chance to try to make it that we can say, all right, did that. There's guys that are better than me. And now what do I do with my life?
And it's hard to be close to, because even though I can admit to myself, if I would have been good enough, that they would have kept me. There were a lot of good days, and I felt like I was close, but I can pinpoint plays. I can pinpoint days that it was on me that I didn't come through and do well. And it's helped me now in a performance-based industry, just in the sense that I don't have to try hard to remind myself, you never know what the moment is going to be. Like, a moment is going to come up where you're going to be evaluated. People are going to remember how you did, but you don't get like a 10-minute lead up to that. Nobody comes up to you and says, hey, in 15 minutes, there's going to be this play in this moment. If you don't do it well, it's going to look pretty bad. Like, it happens like that in my business now and when I played quarterback. So I think having lived through that and having learned from it helps me now to know that, like, you've got to have your foot on the gas and your headlights on the entire damn time, because a moment's going to pop up and everybody's going to take notice if you did it well or not. And there's not going to be much warning that it's coming.
I think there's also maybe a little bit of the mental part of things that we just brush aside. Some of these things are really hard. You throw yourself in a position where you basically, a lot of times, can't fail, or you're in a big enough spotlight where it's, okay, you have to do well. And it doesn't always happen. So I think it's a mental, just like gymnastic meet to go through all these things, right? Go to that camp, be there, be 22 years old. You get cut, you don't have a job. There's just all these things around it, right? It's like you're in a bigger spotlight. People are critiquing you more. Like, you don't have a friend group. It's just, I think it's a huge ask. And I think it's easy to go back and look at those things and say, oh, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. You think about the ask, and it's huge. It's a mental war, it's a physical war, like all these different things that I think we just go to this place of like, oh, we didn't do this, or we didn't do that. But just to be there and to get through some of these things is a lot. I think there's not really a realization of what we're asking ourselves to do in these positions, right? You're like, say, for instance, Brion and I'm 18 years old, he's probably 19 years old. To go and have a moment of, okay, you've got two chances in front of 80,000 or 60,000 people or whatever it is on TV in a big game. Like, we blow that game gets blamed on us.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that we did and we went through it and the outcome was great, but I think there's not really a realization of the mental and physical ask of those moments of like, here, you're doing these things. Here's what's stacked against you, right? Here's all the stuff that could go wrong. Here's all the things that you have to accomplish to be successful. And so I think it's easy to say, you know, this and this happened. You're like, man, it's in a realistic way, it's a big ask, right? It's a big ask for any of the athletes that play at that higher level to come in and perform with that kind of scrutiny, with all those things. You just have to become so mentally, I think, tough that it just seems like it's okay, that's just another Tuesday for me. But for a regular person, that's a huge ask. That's a huge mental ask to just be like, okay, I just did this in front of a lot of people. I've made a huge mistake. I would have to be like, okay, I got to flush that and do it again, and believe in yourself enough to do all that.
Yeah, especially when you're between 18 and 22. Those are super difficult things to do. And I think it's one of the reasons why, looking back on it, people value the athletic experience so much and say that it helps them when they get older, because it's really freaking hard. And we all internalize it. And when we went through it, there wasn't the awareness of what a thing it was to go through it. And there wasn't the kind of help available. So it's a lot to navigate emotionally and mentally as a kid when you play at a program like Iowa or you're trying out for a professional team. I think that's why one of the reasons people say it's much more mental than physical, because the physical tasks we were being asked to do, we could do pretty well most of the time. How are you going to navigate it mentally and emotionally? when things don't go well and it's really difficult, what's your confidence level going to be at that point? Are you going to be able to battle through it and find yourself on the right side of it for the next opportunity? And thankfully, we didn't know it going through it. Looking back on it, it's easy to see how difficult it was. And it's really one of the main examples why we look back and say, that helped me a lot. That helped me now as an adult when I have to do hard things, because that was a lot to deal with at that age.
Yeah, and I think maybe you said it a lot more eloquently than I did. We need to give ourselves a break as well. It's like we're so hard on the outcomes, and it's what we actually went through was immense in a lot of ways.
It's one of the things I've gotten better at, Nick, is giving myself a break, and that trying not to feel as much of that pressure. And when things don't go well, because things are not going to go well in a live broadcast, and it might happen early, is that I don't get to the place of an emotional bad spot or having really bad self-talk or feeling really negative about what just happened as much as I did when I was a kid or even as a young adult in this business. And I wish I would have been there earlier, but I know that those times in Iowa helped me kind of realize that can happen and get to the point of moving on in the moment, not moving on 2 days later when you think about it, but moving on right away and not letting yourself spend a couple of counts in that bad spot. Those sort of things felt easy to do or easy to fall victim to as a 22-year-old.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good segue into the broadcasting piece. I'd be interested to hear how you prepare for broadcasting, like your mental and whatever preparation, what that looks like. And then I guess your process as you go through it would be interesting to hear as well. As you're in broadcast, how it works and like what you're thinking about, if that's something you'd like to share.
Sure. My prep is different based off of which role I'm playing. So I call games as a play-by-play person, and I also host studio shows. So how I prepare has a lot to do with if I'm hosting a show in the studio or if I'm calling the event. So for example, yesterday I hosted our Premier League studio coverage for pre, halftime, and post-game. The way I prepare for that is I get to know the teams and the issues and the storylines and headlines for those teams as well as I can. So that there was no surprise that I was hosting yesterday. It was on my schedule for the last month. So as we get closer to that date, I will take the couple of teams, or like yesterday, there were 6 different teams playing in that window. And I'll read everything I can from the last week about those teams. And I don't have to memorize as much as I do for when I'm calling an event, but when I'm hosting an event, I do have to have my finger on the pulse of what's important with that team, what they've done recently. And if you are a fan of Liverpool and you follow them every single day and you're just a diehard fan and you tune on, you don't want the studio host who doesn't know how to say the name of the coach or the players or doesn't know that they've won 4 in a row instead of 3 in a row. I try to have those basic things that the hardcore fan, if he or she tunes in, he's going to know or she's going to know, I know what I'm talking about. I spend time with these teams. I understand what's important to their fans and their players, and I'm going to present it that way. So as a host, I try to get myself in that position where whatever team we're going to talk about, I know the issues. I'm comfortable with the names. I'm comfortable with the stories that they're all thinking about. And then for the studio, there will be what's called a rundown for like a pregame show where we have literally mapped out. If I had one here in front of me, I could hold it up, but it's basically a loose plan for how, let's say that the first segment is, if it's 9 minutes long, it's got a plan for how those 9 minutes are going to lay out. It's not a script in the sense that nobody's memorizing words or lines, but we know the very first thing we're going to talk about is Erling Haaland got ruled out for 5 to 7 weeks yesterday. He's the second leading scorer in the league. What's this mean to Man City? I know we're going to talk about that for 2 minutes. So I get ready for that conversation. I know when we get done with that, I'm going to show a full screen of another game that's coming 15 minutes later, and I'm going to tee up the guys on what's important in that game. So there's a roadmap in the form of a rundown that I try to get really familiar with and know what the turns are coming, where we want to go after each point, and what I want to say about each point. And I think it's a must that I know the very most important headlines and issues, the positives and negatives, that the people who are following that team, that I know them as well.
And when you say you've got 9 minutes, is that something you're seeing like a clock and you're pushing towards that? Or how do you judge that part of, okay, I need to talk about X and I've got X amount of time to do it, and you might be back and forth with other people. Like, how are you thinking about it in those terms then?
So I know, like, when I glance at this rundown, this roadmap, I've done it enough times at this point throughout the years where I can look at it and get a feel for what 9 minutes looks like, or if it's a 3-minute segment, or if it's a 15-minute segment. I know, like, my hosting mind knows what that feels like, what it looks like, and how it's going to feel when I'm out there. Thankfully, I have an IFB in. That's a thing that goes in my ear that's hopefully hidden from everybody at home if it's tucked in there the right way. But when you're doing a studio show, you have that, and it gives you a direct line to the producer. And the producer at NBC is down the hall in what they call a control room. And he or she, I feel like we're in it together. Like, we talked about Coach Patterson, Coach Fry, and I being in cahoots together. The producer and I are that way for the entire show, because he or she communicates with me what's coming next, how much time we have left, just anything that I need to know is the one who's out there executing the timing and the plan and the topics. They let me know. So that saves me. I don't have to have, like, literally how 9 minutes is going. I'm not looking at a clock on the wall. I know what the rundown says and where we want to go next, but the producer is keeping track of time. So if we're coming up against that 9 minutes, he or she can be like, got to wrap, Paul. You got to get these guys to wrap, got to get to break within the next 10 seconds. Or, we got time, let this conversation breathe. You got a couple more minutes. They will be giving me those messages in my ear. So it's good if I have a feel for the timing, which I do and always try to, but the specifics of it and the exact, like, in the moment, what that timing means that I have to do, the producer lets me know of that.
Interesting. So you're taking real-time feedback. You've got to make sure you're saying the right thing. You've got to make sure conversations are going the right way. That's a lot to go on at one time.
Yeah, it's a lot. And when I left local TV, guys, when I left KWWL, I was the weekend sports anchor. So if you picture how that works, you've got 3 or 4 minutes, sometimes 2 or 3 minutes, to read the teleprompter, do highlights. Like, that's basically all scripted. Like, you know how that 3-minute layout of time is going to go. When you're hosting a show, I don't have a teleprompter. There's no script of words in front of me. It's a lot more adjusting in the moment and having this need to be nimble with information and things that are on your mind. So I found right away, anchoring in local TV was so much different than hosting at the national level. And looking back, I was kind of lucky to survive those first couple of years at NFL Network, because hosting requires so many skills that you don't get to develop or think about as a local news anchor.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then also afterwards, I guess you're probably going through and doing like a post as well, right? You're looking at how you spoke, your body language, probably all that stuff.
Yeah, I try to go easy on myself, but I also don't want to go too far or too many shows in a row or too many weeks in a row without watching to see how I did. So I long ago put aside this thought that perfect show was out there, that sometime I was going to get an A+ and my body language was going to be perfect and my diction would be perfect and I hit all the right topics. I hold myself to a high standard, but also remind myself that if you're trying to be perfect, if you're trying to get that A every single time, you're going to be miserable leaving the studio every night. So I really try and find the balance between, okay, I know what good is, I know what my job entails, and I know how it feels when I'm doing it well, but don't try to be perfect, because that effort to be perfect, or that thought that every little thing has to go right, will get you in a lot of trouble. So, like, in basic sports fan mentality, I try to tell myself with every segment, with every show, hit a line drive, man. Line drive to center, you're standing on first base, you win. You do that again, same thing. Like, trying to hit that towering home run as a host or as a play-by-play guy, it's going to get you in trouble, because every now and then the stars align and something feels awesome. But most of the time, if you do it well and you do it well again the next time and the next segment, the next show, That's good job security in this business. So I try to keep that in mind and not beat myself up too much when it doesn't go perfectly, because most shows don't.
So it's more just self-reflection from you then, and not necessarily from them. I thought it would have been from your work, like we're trying to achieve something that way, but I guess it depends if people watch it or not, right?
NBC is a really good feedback place. Like our producers and our directors are the most like coaches that I played for as I've been around here in this business, and found that a lot of times you don't get feedback. NBC is good that way. Like my producers will let me know what worked. Hey, this wasn't that great. Let's think about this. This needs to be better. I feel like I've come to a place where I have a pretty good grasp of my own game. And if I'm doing well, I know my strengths and I know the things that can take me down the wrong path. I'm not focused on the right things. So my own grasp of my own game helps. And then having producers that are communicative that way in terms of feedback, it's a good combo to know what makes you good or know what can make you not so good, and to be comfortable with that, and to have producers that you know what they think. That combo has been a really good one for me these last, 11 years now at NBC.
Yeah. So I guess like that team aspect again, which is crazy how it goes through a bunch of different stuff.
Right.
I'm interested in, you said you've done the Olympics a number of times. Is that something you would actually go to the Olympics to do, or did you do that in studio? I think the other question is, I think your wife was a Hall of Fame rower, and you said you had done rowing recently. So she giving you some tips as well, or I guess some talking points?
She did, whether I wanted them or not. She was super helpful. It was really fun to get the assignment of rowing. It's sports so near and dear to our hearts here at our house, because my wife, I can brag on her. She's the only Hall of Famer Iowa has in rowing. She's the best rower in the history of the sport, 30 plus years at Iowa. And so I didn't know her then. We both went there, but she's younger than me. So we didn't meet until we were both done with school. So I didn't know her when she was achieving that way at Iowa as a rower. So it was really cool for me to get that assignment to call rowing at the Olympics this past summer. The first two Olympics, I went to the Rio Summer Games in 2016 and called water polo. I went to the Winter Games in Pyeongchang in 2018 and called ski jumping. Then COVID came, and like our business model, really not just at NBC, throughout the broadcasting industry, shifted. Like people realized that they can keep us back in the studio, because they had to during COVID, and put on the production there. It's a much more economical production. And for a number of things, we have kept with that post-COVID. So I haven't been to the last handful of Olympics. I've called them out of the studio, got my own tiny little studio with my monitor, and my analyst has his or her studio right next to me. That's how we call it. So the Paris Games, the Tokyo Games, the Beijing Games, I guess the last three Olympics I have called from our studio in Stamford, Connecticut.
Oh, nice. I guess if you're doing them live, you're hoping that the times line up, right? It's like you're not 2 at 3 o'clock in the morning.
That's only a hope, because the reality was we were there doing it in the middle of the night. Yeah.
So I figured it.
Those locations, there was no other way to do it. If you're going to do them live, I think my shift has been like from anywhere from midnight to 9 a.m. for those couple weeks. So it's just the way it is. Like we all just kind of deal with it, get used to it, and go do a good job anyway.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure it's an exciting thing to be able to represent the United States that way too. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Pretty awesome stuff. And it's, being at NBC, the Olympics are such a part of our DNA that all of us as on-air talent get asked to do some things that are way outside of our comfort zone. So like calling a football game, calling a basketball game, there's certainly challenges that come with it, but I've thought about football and basketball every day since I was a tiny little kid. Now, ski jumping, water polo, rowing, that's brand new stuff to me. So figuring out how to do a decent job at these sports that you didn't grow up with, I mean, it's helped me grow up as a broadcaster so much, because it's difficult. We go back to that same message I talked about football, doing things that are really hard, figuring out how to call a water polo match between Spain and Australia, and then doing it again between China and USA an hour later at 5 a.m. That's a heck of a challenge. And I'm glad those kind of things have come up, because it's really made me a lot better.
Yeah, I can imagine. We talked to Pat.
Anger.
Pat's last name.
That anger, yeah.
We were basically like, how do you not curse on air? Especially like he's a character, I think. So we had to laugh about that part as a sidebar.
It's nice to get on a podcast where you don't have to. I think I've only gone F-bomb once, but I'm certainly capable of doing more. My apologies in advance.
No, it's funny because we have this program called The Script, and it goes through it at text edits, and it
Oh, nice.
all the ums and that. It's like 1,500, 2,000.
I would hope I don't have too many. I hope I don't have too many.
I can already tell this will be a quick
caught
edit.
one. I think I was one. I was kind of like, God, is he even going to say
It's one too many.
Yeah.
One too many. When I first got to NFL Network, the executive producer was not real high on me. He's like, you need a voice coach. And I'm like, okay. So I spent about a year with this voice coach. It was like the most uncomfortable thing in the history of the world. Just unbelievable things that I would have to do in these sessions. It just made me sweat. I would dread them. It's hard to think about, but he was so good about little tips, eliminating the ums. Everybody knows you should. How do you do it? How do you picture yourself getting past that? Just some super functional lessons in communicating that I sweated through every last one of them and I hated them, but it was a fantastic help in those little things, eliminating ums, having the right kind of pauses and those kind of things. I hated doing it, but I'm super glad it happened.
I would agree with that. I think when I first started this thing, I was like, oh, Lord, I need to communicate better. This is terrible. So I'm in the rough part of that journey right now.
This guy, Arthur, he would tell me, when you say, or when anybody says, all that is your body telling you that you want to take a little breath. If you think about it, next time you want to go in between as you're talking, if you just actually put the little period on, if you could visualize it, and he would always say this, visualize putting the period on it. Put the period on your thought and take a tiny little breath, your ums will go away. And you get that little bit of space that allows whoever's listening to you to take it in a little bit more because you paused instead of hammering 1,000 words together all on top of each other. So the visualizing commas and periods and taking tiny little breaths and instead of saying, that was about a year of my life after hosting shows, driving from Culver City to Encino in Southern California to study with him. Really fascinating stuff.
Interesting. So how do you think about cadence? I guess cadence would maybe be speed, and you think about volume as well?
I do. I think more about cadence. I don't consider it top of mind as much as I used to because it all just becomes natural. But I think that when you're broadcasting, you can't be fake. You can't talk way louder than you normally would. And you can't just turn into this game show host because people sense that right away. But if I talked with the exact same volume and energy and cadence that I did when I'm talking to my kids at dinner, it would feel muted and not enough energy and not quite right. Because just like they say that TV can add 10 pounds, TV can take away energy and bring you down as well. Even when you feel like you have good energy, it doesn't come through and cut through as much as you think it is, especially at a game. If you're calling a game and there's a big crowd there, you've got to be really loud. So to me, they always say, you got to find your voice. And the specifics of that for me in broadcasting, finding your voice, finding this point where I'm not talking the way I talk at dinner time with my kids, but I'm also not cranking it up into this fake, loud, insincere version of myself where I'm trying to be a TV personality. And it takes years, at least for me, it took me a long time to find that spot where the kind of projection and volume and pace that's needed to broadcast well, but I'm not crossing that line into being somebody that I'm not.
Interesting. Thanks for walking through us. Yeah.
I can talk about my kids and my profession, and that's about it. And Iowa football back in the day. I'm pretty limited on the things I can go in detail on, but you've hit me on a couple of things that I can. So that's good.
And how did you get into this line of work? So did you study in school, or how'd you get into local TV?
Yeah, I never had a journalism class, Brian. I never had a broadcast class. I never had any thought when I was at Iowa or the years right after that this was something I might want to do. I completely stumbled upon it. You guys brought up Marv. I was at home doing nothing in that stage between playing football and kind of figuring out what I want to do in my mid to late 20s. Marv was just getting done with his all-pro career with the Patriots and thinking about getting into TV. He was going to Craig James Broadcasting School. You guys remember Craig? He was on the air a lot, All-American running back with Eric Dickerson down there at SMU. He, for a couple of years, had a 2 or 3 day broadcasting school in Dallas where they would put you through sessions, how to be a reporter, how to call a game. It was like 4 or 5 different disciplines, and they would teach you and then have actual sessions where you could put something on tape and give you the VHS tape along with a write-up. It was just a lot of feedback. Marv said he was going. You want to go? It's $2,000. I'm like, I got nothing else to do. Like, I didn't really know what else I wanted to do. So I went and really liked it. With that VHS tape, I sent it to Channel 9, Cedar Rapids, to John Campbell. And John got back to me and said, this was the late summer of 1998. And John said, come on up, talk to me. So I went up to the studio, talked to John and the news director, Bob Smith, who was very good to me, actually was my news director then at Channel 7 in Waterloo a few years later. And they said, we've been kind of looking for something to do differently with our Iowa football coverage. Love to have you around a couple of days a week, maybe for a preview on Thursday and then a wrap up on Sunday. I'm like, cool. And like literally in my head, I'm like, I got nothing else to do. So why not? And we got to the end of the season and John and Bob said, obviously football's over, but if you're willing to work at a pretty low rate, we'd like to keep you around and teach you the business. Go out and shoot events, edit them together, produce a segment, put together packages, voice packages, do some reports. And I wanted to anchor. And I said, can I do some anchoring too? And they thought about it and said, when we're not in a ratings month, which, God, I haven't been in local TV for a while, but I think there's 4 months out of the year where they keep track of how many people are watching. And it's very important. They said, when we're not in a ratings month, on the Monday nights, when we have Monday Night Football, and we come on at like midnight, you can host those sports shows. I'm like, sweet, I'm in. So I stuck around and learned the business, got on the air a little bit and kept doing more and more. And I was part-time there for quite a while. And then I got hired full-time at KWWL to be the weekend sports anchor there. Did that for 3 years and got a lucky break to get on with NFL Network right when they started back in 2004. I lucked into it. It wasn't something I sought out. I just, timing-wise, had a couple of good breaks and found something I really enjoyed doing and got a break to go to NFL Network. And here I am. So crazy.
My brother-in-law is Mark Woodley.
Yeah.
So he might have gotten the break at KWWL, left, because I think he might have started
Yes,
at
he was
04.
Yeah, he was doing some work. I left in summer of 2004. I left and he was around doing some work as a really young kid. And that may be exactly it. He might have gotten my job that I left behind. And clearly he's done very well with it.
What have you covered from Iowa with Iowa football, basketball, and other sports?
I've called 3 Iowa football games the last 2 years. I called that really close loss at home in 23 against Minnesota when they called back the punt return.
Yeah.
I called the win at Northwestern, I think was the next week or 2 weeks later at Wrigley Field. And then this year on NBC on a Friday night, I called Iowa's win over Nebraska. So that's been really fun to come back home and to be in that stadium. I've enjoyed it a lot. Good interaction with Kirk, just a world of respect for him. Every time I get the assignment, whether it's football or basketball, and I did 3 Iowa basketball games this year, it's just, I'm like anybody else. It's fun to go back to where you're from. So I feel lucky that I've gotten those calls recently.
You had Kirk Ferentz as a coach on the staff when you were at the Hawkeyes in 1989. Curious about how your relationship with him and how that's moved into when you started doing the broadcasting thing and done some Iowa games recently.
Backing up to 89 in my recruiting, Kirk was not my recruiter, as we talked about Dan McCarney was, but I remember interacting with Coach Ferentz and just being impressed. He's got a real good, strong, authentic presence about him, strong handshake, and just really the guy's guy. And even at that point in 1989, he'd established himself as a really good offensive line coach. He was there for my first season, and then he left to be the head coach at Maine and started that journey. We spent time with Bill Belichick on his staff in Cleveland, went to Baltimore. I didn't really keep in touch with him. I saw him at the NFL Combine in '94 when I was there. He was coaching O-line with the Browns. And I remember, I don't recall like specifics of the conversation, but I remember walking away from our 5 or 10 minute interaction, being impressed with, he remembered me. Like he wanted to spend time with me. He was happy I was there and just had a really good feeling about him and was impressed that he took time with these two guys with strong Iowa backgrounds talking to each other. He made sure to engage with me that way. And that made an impression. I remember being in local TV when he was a young head coach at Iowa. And it was like, I'm doing my job and I'm trying to figure out how to be someone on the air who covers Iowa football. He knew that I knew coaches and players, yet he had a job to do and didn't want to share too much. So there was like a balance that we had to walk for about 3 years when I was in local TV that I thought he handled in a really respectful, professional way that I really appreciated. And hopefully he and I haven't talked about it, but hopefully he feels the same way about how I did my job when I was working in TV in Eastern Iowa, covering the Hawkeyes. That covers a lot of years. But then if you flash forward to now, I've called 3 Iowa football games for NBC the last 2 years. And he has a reputation of dealing with the national media that is a very strong one, in the sense that we spend time with all the coaches, no matter what game we're calling. We'll spend time with the head coach, oftentimes on a Zoom or in person if we're on campus. And he's good about his time. He doesn't make you feel like he's got to be somewhere 10 minutes ago. He'll sit down and engage with you. He's not going to give you the game plan or take you behind the scenes too much, but he understands what we're looking for to add to the broadcast. I can't call the play the entire time. I need some interesting things in between plays to add. And I think Coach Ferentz has a really good grip of what we're looking for to add there and is willing to engage in those kind of conversations. I've always liked him quite a bit, and just this new layer to my familiarity with him, calling a national game with him as the head coach, has just been kind of one more step into realizing what a quality person he is, because he doesn't give me anything extra just because I played at Iowa a million years ago. But he treats us all with a pretty good, healthy respect and a willingness to share good broadcast nuggets that I've really appreciated.
You mentioned him giving you the attention and the not feeling like he's got to be somewhere 10 minutes ago. I think that's classic Kirk, right?
Yeah.
We were in the facility before one of the games and he sat with us for, I think, 45 minutes, enough where I was kind of like, you've got stuff to do today. Right? You don't need to be here.
Yeah.
Catching up with us. Dig more deeply into that part of the relationship between the coaches, the media, and also how you would approach that, because you've got to show up and you've got to do a certain job. You've got to have an interesting story. You've got to ask some tough questions at times. The coach wants to come off in the right way. The media, there's a kind of, can be a contentious relationship there. Sure. Talk more about how you would approach that, or is it a trust building thing over time where you're like, okay, I've got to at least hold to the standard of getting the story, holding you to a standard without being disrespectful. How do you think about that? Or talk more about that, if you would.
When those sort of situations come up where there's an uncomfortable topic that has to be addressed, if I'm calling the game and there's something about that team that week, whether it's a player suspended or a long losing streak or a certain facet of the team that's ranked really low in the nation of the conference, I have to ask about that, because it's going to come up in the broadcast if I'm doing my job the right way. There's a way to bring it up that is quick and to the point, that's respectful, that I think 9 out of 10 coaches respect. And they know the game. They know it's going to come up. They know we have to talk about it. And it behooves them to try to present it in at least a decent way. I think coaches recognize that dance that we all have to do. I'd rather not bring up that topic. He'd rather not talk about it, but we know it's got to happen. So let's do it in a professional, efficient way. And I think most of the coaches are really good about it. If you just get right to the point and maybe ask a follow-up, but don't do it unless you have to. If you don't belabor it, and if you show that you've got an understanding of the sensitivity of it, I think that they understand that really well. When I was the radio voice for Notre Dame football, I would sit in on the production meetings that all my colleagues had at NBC with Brian Kelly. And Mike Tirico was calling the games then for NBC. And Mike has become a good friend, a terrific colleague. And I would just go in there and sit by Mike and watch him run a meeting. And it was a master class, a PhD level class in how a play-by-play person can handle productive time with the head coach and his staff. I feel so lucky that I got to sit and watch that. So whether I'm dealing with Coach Ferentz or another coach around the Big Ten, I often think about what would Mike do here? How would Mike address this difficult situation? And it's helped me a lot thinking back on how Mike has done it and what I've seen from him with my own two eyes and heard with my own ears. It's helped me navigate those situations that aren't real comfortable for the coach or the broadcaster, but have to be addressed.
Yeah, I can imagine. It also has to be maybe a little bit of a challenge being an alumni, doing games from your school that you went to, tempering kind of your excitement in that for the school, not doing an unbiased sort of account of things. I'm sure there's times where you want to get excited and do all that part. Also talk about maybe the differences and similarities between the way Coach Fry and Coach Ferentz have interacted with the media. I think Coach Fry really had an ability to get in touch or tell stories or get the media bought into his thing and his personality and that stuff.
Two totally different kinds of personalities and really two totally different kinds of jobs now when you consider every game's on TV or streaming somewhere now. So Kirk has to have that meeting every single week. There's no such thing as a game that's not on somewhere. He's meeting with a broadcast crew 12, 13, 14 times a year. Hayden probably did it 3 or 4. Just the way of the world back then that every game wasn't on. Iowa football was a pretty big deal. We weren't on every game. I don't think half our games were on. Kirk has to do it a lot more. By virtue of that, he's gotten really good at it. Hayden was more folksy, more storytelling. Keith Jackson would come to town to do a game, and those two, I think, would just hang out and laugh and have a good time, where there's a lot of different crews that come to town now. And I am sure Kirk Ferentz deals with them all in the same respectful, professional way that he does with us. The question you brought up about not being biased, calling an Iowa game or not cheering and those kind of things, that comes up a lot from a lot of different people. And you would be amazed to know how little that feeling lives inside of me when I'm getting ready for a game, when I'm calling a game. Truly, my only hope, and I don't know what Iowa fans think of this, my only cheering, like my only dog in the fight is a close game. And that's it. Like I don't have to tamp down any feelings for Iowa if they get a first down or if they're not playing well. They are one of two teams out there playing, and that is it. I think there's a lot of intensity that is built into the performance of my job and making sure that we do it right. And whether it's Iowa, Minnesota, or Purdue, Illinois, I cannot tell you how much it does not matter to me in the way I call a game if Iowa's playing, Iowa's winning or losing. It's different if I'm somewhere else and I'm just watching a game with friends. Of course, my feeling is different. But when I'm in a booth, I've been very pleasantly surprised that those feelings are not there. I'm talking to the producer. I'm trying to identify players. I'm trying to keep storylines in my mind and hoping that the game is close at the end. And that is it. So I've not had any problem at all, which is really nice for me to be able to say sincerely in showing any bias one way or the other, if it's the Hawkeyes out there or not.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess that would be a sign of being a professional, probably too, to some degree, where you're locked in on the things you need to get done and the stories and the interactions that you need to get told. So
yeah,
I could see it that way and never really thought about that part of it.
Yeah, it's not a thought or not an emotion that even registers, to be honest. And like you look around, Kirk Herbstreit called Ohio State games forever. Kirk loves the Buckeyes. You wouldn't know it the way he calls a game. He's calling the game. It happens at every level. You can find a booth every single weekend where there's somebody who played at that school. And if they're a pro, you would never, ever know it because they're so caught up in just doing their job the right way.
Yeah, I can imagine. The other question I had, as far as the coaches, Do you think that with all the media, social media, all the exposure, all those things, that the coaches that are going to succeed going forward have to really have a media personality to sell the school, I guess? So like you're seeing like a Deion Sanders type, right? Someone who he does it in his own way. So I don't think everyone's going to do that, be that kind of volatile primetime, that sort of thing. But I think our coaches really going to have to start thinking about what their media strategy is and like how they deal with the media, because it's an outlet, right? It's another channel for them to sell and to get their program excited. And do you think that's going to fall on the coaches as much, or is that not something that's in the conversation maybe?
I think that no matter how much money athletic departments come up with to pay the players can make up for whatever personality the coach has. There's a bottom line to it right now that wasn't around. I think that's this first thought that comes to mind. But you mentioned it, if coaches had to be like a media personality, and the ones who can do it sincerely within their own personality, like Deion, it's a wonderful coup to the university. If that person is being him or herself and has that kind of personality people are drawn to, brings them more money and more attention. So if you're being true to yourself, yeah, being a media personality is great. I don't think you have to have this big media persona, though, if it's not you. Now, I'll say it in the very next breath, you can't push back on that either. I don't think we're in an age where a coach can say, I don't want to do this media stuff. I hate social media. I wish the players weren't on it. I don't like Instagram, and all these players transfer and drives me nuts. It can't be that way. Maybe like that could be your general thought, but you can't push back on all of these things that are such a big part of it. Maybe you're not a giant media personality. You've got to be comfortable with the media and use that part of the game to your advantage, whether you're big about it or you're just efficient and authentic about it. And I think Kirk's a good example. Kirk isn't a giant personality. He's very well perceived nationally by the media because he's himself and he makes time for people. He's not like getting a lot of clicks, or I don't think he's anybody that would be nobody's going to describe him as one of the biggest coaching personalities out there, but he doesn't resist it either. He's happy to spend his time that way and does a good job with it. There's a lot of coaches that could be described the same way. So I think as long as you're not pushing back against the things that have really come into their world, social media, NIL, transfer portal, you've got to embrace them to some level and be authentic about it. And I think if you do that, you don't have to try and be some giant personality that maybe isn't being true to yourself.
Yeah, and I guess maybe I'm not asking the question as correctly. I don't think they have to be like a big personality, but I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole for communication and just different things about using your hands and your facial expressions and just all these things, like a storytelling thing where coaches get a microphone from them, they got their arms down by their side and they're looking down and talking. And so is it behoove these coaches to say, yes, I need to communicate a little differently within my own style, obviously, which I guess was what I was trying to say before, of using those things to their advantage, being such a visual world these days. It doesn't have to be like Kirk Ferentz doesn't have to be like stomping his feet and jumping around, but he's just think about it differently when he's on camera, and more, is that an upside that schools should look and say, hey, you should get some media training because you're the face of our school, you're the face of our program. I guess it's the same for the kids. That's one of those things that we're looking at now. We have some great players and you get in front of a camera and you're just like, that's an opportunity to show the school and showcase that. It feels like a missed opportunity or something that maybe just hasn't really resonated yet of getting into that, but maybe that's a rabbit hole that I went.
No, I totally agree with you, Nick. I think it's a great point. And I think it's something like you said, media training. That's a wonderful idea for any coach because so many people are seeing this coach. He or she is the portal into how somebody feels about that school, obviously the athletic program. So it's a massive opportunity, and schools that want to invest in that and understand in that for media training, for helping that coach be more aware of his body language or her body language, they're out there for everybody to see. And because of social media, they're going to see it all the time. I think it's something that an athletic department, like if I'm an athletic director, I've got a close eye on that. And I've got some budget set aside to help out with some media training to help that person go from here to here because it's that important. That many people are going to get a feeling about the university based off of how you conduct yourself in a press conference or during a game. That awareness and that dedication to being, if you're not going to be really good at it, you can't struggle with it because it's going to be a negative for all of us. I think that is well worth the time, the awareness, and the investment for athletic departments to help coaches be good that way.
Yeah, I guess maybe that was more of my question of if you've noticed that of the difference of people that do it well and don't. And it's like a glaring thing.
For
like,
sure.
If you came in like the media, you can get them to bond with you in a different way. And it just, it feels like that's one of the things of sports that hasn't necessarily been talked about as much.
I think coaches are aware of it. I really do. Getting around and talking to football coaches and basketball coaches, I get the feeling that they know what's at stake and they know they can't. I mean, it is not in their best interest, their program or the athletic departments, to have bad interaction with a broadcast crew or to have history or a long run of really bad body language when they're in the public eye like that.
And I guess you could almost go the other direction too, of having not necessarily scripted, but there's some sort of drama that could be created there too to bring attention to things, right? There's always that sort of thing, but that's another tangent. Weird YouTubes I've watched. So
yeah, I hear you. I'm actually spending time with one of the NFL teams this offseason, presenting to all the players who are thinking about getting into media about things to think about and be aware of if they choose to go down that road. To expand on your point, I think players are aware of all the games on TV and all the shows that are out there and all the outlets now where you can get your voice out there. There are a lot of players thinking about that for the next step, but there's not a lot of information and a lot of help on how to do it and how to be good at it right away. So I'm excited to take a small step with that team, interact with the guys and share some things that I've learned that maybe can help them if and when they think about going this way.
And that's what we were talking about too, is like, we just got thrown in. Our first media experience was not like, here's how you can learn to speak and what they're looking for and how to give good responses and why they're asking you these questions. So there you go. The press citizen wants to talk to you.
Yeah. Good luck.
And so I don't know if that's really changed much, but I think there's a big opportunity to help kids.
Imagine it has. I would think, I don't know that for sure, but I would guess that athletic departments, especially with the programs that are the most forward facing, are helping the kids find success there.
And we noticed the difference. We spoke with Chad Greenway, and he, I think, has taken on some of that as a career, done public speaking and that. So you can just see the difference of how he handled himself, how he dealt with questions, like how he was able to communicate a pretty succinct way.
Yeah.
He just had the practice, had gone to these iClub fundraising deals and had to get up and tell stories and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So anything else, if you build up some experience and really care about being decent at it, you're going to get to that point. It's no different than any other thing that you recognize that you want to be good at. If you spend time with it, that comfort level comes pretty easily.
Yeah, I can imagine. I guess it depends on where you're starting from too.
I wouldn't put you guys at the deficit.
We were back in the day for sure.
Back in the day, this would have been an even worse podcast.
Yeah.
All we can do is try and get better, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks, Paul. I know you got to run here.
Sure. Yeah. I appreciate you guys thinking of me. It's cool to have a couple of Hawkeyes getting the Hawkeye stories and the Hawkeye memories out there. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for doing what you're doing with this.
Thanks, Paul. Great catch up. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.